Pursuant to Internal Revenue Service guidance, be advised that any federal tax advice contained in this program is not intended to be used, and it cannot be used by any person or entity for the purpose of avoiding any tax penalties that may be imposed by the Internal Revenue Service or any other U.S. federal taxing authority or agency, or promoting, marketing, or recommending to another party any transaction or matter addressed in this show. The opinions expressed by the host and the guests are their own and may not be used as authoritative advice. Any use of this material without the written consent of the host is strictly prohibited.
Welcome back. I am your host, Attorney Stephen Leahy, and this is the IRS Radio Hour on AM 560, The Answer. Man, there's lots of information. We didn't get anything we wanted to get in that first section. Just too much. There's just too much to...
That's why I'm hoping Levels will sponsor the show and bring us into another hour.
We get 2 hours. That's it.
That's the third time we brought up their name. Now
maybe we got to do Tom Hanks. He seems to have more money, so maybe Tom Hanks can...
I don't think we agree politically with
that's probably
okay.
True. That's probably true. So this is the...
this is now we're getting into the section of the show, which is the your blog.
My blog.
And what is this? What's the entry this week again?
Today it's 7? IRS Bankruptcy, Chapter 7.
Oh.
In the last several weeks of the show, we've been talking about the 6 things you can do if you owe the IRS money. And the first thing you can do is pay them, right? Write them a check and be done with them. And the second thing you can do is set up an installment agreement. We talked about that several weeks ago.
What if you wrote them a check and it bounced?
Well, then you didn't pay them, did you?
Okay.
So
just wondering
if you are interested in any of these others, they're all on the blog. If you go to my blog, if you go to chicagotaxteam.com, there is a link there, Open Tax Blog, and each one of these options I have written an article about, so you can read the article. But you can also go to the IRS Radio Hour link and view or listen to each section about these different options. So again, if you have any questions, go to the website. You'll get an answer there. So the second thing is the installment agreement. The third thing is the offer in compromise. The fourth thing we talked about last week was currently not collectible status. And then the fifth thing is bankruptcy. Now, bankruptcy is a complicated area of the law when it comes to taxes, even when it's not in taxes, but taxes makes it much more complicated.
Is that what Chapter 7 means?
Actually, that's a very good question.
Thank you very much.
The Bankruptcy Code is found under Title 11 of the United States Code. And if you think of the Bankruptcy Code as a book, and like every other book, it's divided into chapters. And this is why you hear so much about a Chapter 7 or a Chapter 11 or a Chapter 13 or a Chapter 9. So Chapter 7 is liquidation, and this is the kind that most people think about when they think about bankruptcy, or when they hear about it, that they're hearing about Chapter 7. Chapter 9 are these municipal bankruptcies. So Detroit is in a Chapter 9 bankruptcy. Chapter 11.
Weren't they the first ones?
No. Chapter 9's been around for a long time.
That's what I was saying.
A lot of cities in California, 3 or 4 are right now in a Chapter 9 bankruptcy. So you'll hear. So now that I mentioned it, Jim, you'll hear a lot about it in the news.
That's right. It's like hearing a new word.
That's right. All of a sudden, it's everywhere. So, and Chapter 11 is generally for businesses, and United. A lot of companies that you've heard about have been in bankruptcy. When you hear about companies in bankruptcy,
United Airlines,
it's generally Chapter 11. Chapter 13 is for wage earners, so it's a repayment reorganization for families, usually trying to save their home. Chapter 15 is for cross-border. So there's all these different chapters that are available, and each chapter has a different remedy for a different situation. So today we're going to talk about Chapter 7, and the title of Chapter 7, again, is liquidation. So what happens under Chapter 7 liquidation is all your assets above a certain level of exemptions allowed by law, and these are state laws. So in a vast majority of cases, nobody loses anything in a Chapter 7 because there's enough exemptions in Illinois law to protect all of your assets.
Speaking of assets, didn't Vanessa Williams get
She has an IRS problem, Jim. Yes. Okay. They have filed the tax lien against her. That is true. I like the way you worked that in there.
Yeah.
It's kind of like how you worked in Lonnie Anderson.
I did like that. Yes, that's true.
So we like to talk about that.
We like to talk about that.
So under Chapter 7.
Go ahead.
So let's talk about taxes in Chapter 7, because all taxes are not dischargeable. Only some taxes are dischargeable. So, for instance, if you have a trust fund recovery penalty, those are never dischargeable in bankruptcy. And recent taxes, so my taxes from last year or the year before, those aren't dischargeable.
And then that question was, are property taxes? And those
aren't dischargeable.
We know that.
But taxes that are dischargeable, you have to meet 3 important dates in order to have taxes discharged in bankruptcy. So the first one is that tax return must be due more than 3 years from the date that you file your bankruptcy. So, and remember now, your taxes are due in April 15th of the next year for the year before. So 2010 taxes would come due April 15th, 2011, unless you ask for a extension, and then they don't come to until October. October. So you don't know. So again, this is it gets complicated because you have to look into these dates in order to get it right.
What do you mean by 3 years? I don't.
So it's got to be due. So if I file today, for instance, if I would file a bankruptcy case today, and nobody filed an extension, well, 3 years from today would be 2011. That would have been 2010 taxes. Then those 2010 taxes would be dischargeable today, unless I filed an extension, and then those wouldn't be due until October 15th. And if I filed today, they wouldn't be dischargeable. And this is what happens to a lot of people, is that they file a bankruptcy without doing the investigation, and then they were only a month away. And if they would have waited a month, maybe there's $30,000.
Those would have been included in the bankruptcy.
That's right. But
now I understand.
But because if you don't wait, then they're not included, and then they're not dischargeable. So the second date is they must be filed more than 2 years ago. So sometimes they come due, people don't file them, and they don't file them until the next year. So they have to be filed 2 years ago. And then the tax must be assessed more than 240 days ago. So those are the 3 important dates, and they shift because again, the due date's different sometimes. People file things in between. So, for instance, if I ask for an offer in compromise, that might put a delay in those days and may lengthen those dates out, and it gets very complicated. And again, that's why if you're going to think about bankruptcy and you have IRS debts, go see a lawyer who understands IRS debts, not just any bankruptcy attorney, because they don't know IRS law. And it gets very complicated unless you work with this stuff all the time. And I do. I work with it all the time. So the tax, there's 2 things about your conduct. You can't try to evade your taxes, and you can't willfully try to evade them, and it can't be a fraudulent return. So you can't so if all 5 of those criteria, then they are dischargeable in bankruptcy, and you can discharge these in.
Will they go after if you make a mistake on line 7A, is that a fraudulent tax return?
No, that's an error, and that's not a problem. That's not going to make it.
Because you would think that the IRS would go, oh no, you made a mistake on line 8B, and that is fraudulent. No, you're not going to. You've got to pay us.
Yes, no. That's kind of like Illinois does, because Illinois will send you if there is a problem with your taxes, they'll send you a notice of deficiency. There's a problem, and if you don't respond, because you say, okay, I'll pay the extra tax, and you just pay them. Well, or you just agree with it and you don't do anything, it's not counted as a tax return filed. And again, this is where it gets complicated. What you filed, is that a tax return? In that date, what date did you file it? These are all things that could be that could come up as an issue that you have to fight, and you have to understand. Is it a return? There's things that sometimes maybe I'll file something and the IRS says, well, yeah, you did file something, but that's not a tax return. And so then it's not dischargeable. So they're always trying to find a reason why it's not dischargeable. Yeah, they're always trying to find a reason. And then even though you discharge taxes in bankruptcy, then they may still have a lien. We talked about that last week, about liens that may remain even after you file bankruptcy. So again, this gets really complicated, and it's something, again, you need an attorney who really understands this stuff if you're thinking about filing bankruptcy.
Well, just to protect yourself anyway.
Now we go back to hiring an IRS firm that doesn't do bankruptcies, and most IRS, I think, companies don't offer that as a solution. And often bankruptcy is the best solution, sometimes in conjunction with another solution. But if I go see a company who doesn't provide that bankruptcy.
Well, if
then,
they don't provide it, then they don't even look at it.
They don't even give me that as an option.
Or they don't even bring it up. Which is the important thing. That's why you should be. You should go to somebody who's looking out for you. And anyway,
right. and has all the tools in the toolbox.
And has all the tools in the toolbox.
It's important.
How would somebody who was looking for help?
Are you considering bankruptcy? Does the IRS?
No,
do you owe the IRS money? Then you should call me at 312-664-6649. Again, that's 312-664.
Do they get a free book?
6649. You can get a free book if you go to chicagotaxteam.com or send us a question at questions@irsradiohour.com.
Or they could listen here on Sunday nights at 5 o'clock.
But they can't get a free book.
But they could send you a question.
That's right.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.